Hello, everybody. Jeff here, also known as the Revit Kid. Welcome to another episode of BIM After Dark Live. This is episode 44, believe it or not. Let me just fix my mic here. 44. Crazy, I know. Today we're going to talk about some cool stuff. We're going to be talking about family creation, and we're going to be talking about using the array tool within the family environment. This is one of those examples of a question that a subscriber actually sent. So Matt, if you're out there, thanks for sending this. It just kind of spurred a inspiration for me to have this episode. And I like teaching concepts that they're very specific, but they also apply to broad things. And so that's what this is. We're gonna walk through how the array tool works in the family environment, how you can utilize it, and then just some of the need to knows, some important things to understand when you're using the array tool. So this will range from basic to advanced, but really just give you a foundation to use this tool to do all kinds of cool stuff. So thank you for joining me. Welcome everyone. I see people are entering from the chat. We've got people from all over the globe. Algeria was before, UK, Denmark, Texas, Chicago. I mean, all over the place. North Carolina. What's up, everyone? How you doing? Pete's here from Raleigh, North Carolina. Hello, hello. All right. Before we jump into the actual content, I did want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, and let me just roll that real quick. That's right. So this episode is sponsored by BIM Box. For those of you who are not familiar with what BIM Box is, it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a box made for BIM. It is a laptop and desktops that have been created and designed specifically for using Revit, which is really awesome when you think about it. A couple things before I jump into a little story about BIMbox is that I want you to know is that they have a 3-year warranty. They turn around all of their orders in 10 to 14 days, and they have awesome customer support. They also have the NVIDIA 3000 graphics cards in stock, which is pretty sweet. So thank you, BIMbox, for sponsoring this episode. One quick story about BIMbox. I was on a call just the other day, and the person on the other end of the call was rolling through some point clouds and all kinds of stuff, and they had I don't even know how many, 5 or 6 different Revits open, and not versions, just different actual Revits. So Revit 2019, or 2020, but maybe it was open 5 or 6 times, and they were spinning around point clouds, and I was impressed with how well it was handling it. And so I actually asked them, what machine they had, and believe it or not, they had a BIMbox. What a small world, right? So if you're interested, head on over to bimbox.bimafterdark.com. Or you can email sales@bimboxusa.com. Buck and his crew will take care of you. They can hook you up with quotes and turn around and ship you a new machine in 10 to 14 days. Make sure you let them know that you heard about them here on the show. So whether it's from Jeff, the Revit Kid, BIM After Dark, doesn't matter. So thank you, BIMbox, again for sponsoring this episode 44 now of BIM After Dark Live. Who do we got in the house here? We got from Brazil, we got Klaus. How's it going, man? Tom. Tom's watching me on his new BIMbox. Nice. Pete from Raleigh. What's up? Beth. Well, Beth is here again from South Jersey. How's it going, Beth? And Jim. Always great to see you, Jim Balding. Thanks for joining us, guys. So let's jump into a little bit of content here. The other thing actually I should mention is, remember, this is live, so if you're watching and you're joining me right now live, feel free to ask questions and interact in the chat. The reason I like doing this, I could always just record these videos and make tutorials and put them on YouTube, but I really do like this interaction with you guys. I like being able to feed off of the questions and respond to them and almost curate the content based on your comments and questions here live. So feel free to ask questions, chit chat, whatever you want to do during this conversation. So thank you again. All right, before we jump into it, we're talking about family creation today. So I figured I would just highlight really quickly. This is actually, you're not going to see it very well. I'll pull up the digital version. This right here is my family desktop cheat sheet. And I made this a few years ago. I'm going to post a link to it in the chat right now. But if you want to just go directly to it, you just go to free.bimafterdark.com. And I just wanted to point it out because I do think it's extremely helpful. An extremely helpful cheat sheet when you're creating custom content or parametric content in general. And so what I'll do real quickly is also open it and show you guys what it looks like. So there we go there. So just real quickly, what's inside this cheat sheet is, of course, Bluebeam doesn't want to interact the way that it's supposed to, because how many people out there love Bluebeam? Okay, I'm just kidding. I don't mind it all that much. So one of the, some of the things that it's broken into are categories, and so in this category area, I just have a list of some of the things to know about the specific family categories. So, are they cuttable? Are they not cuttable? Does it have a room calculation point? Does it not? Because if you don't know, Revit, depending on the categories you choose, gives you different options for the actual family template. Geometry. This is something that you'd be amazed. You'd be amazed how much I use this. But it's really your SOHCAHTOA. So it's your right triangles geometry and all the math you would need for sine, cosine, tangent, all that good stuff. There's some recommendations from file sizes, and these are full disclosure. Those are Autodesk file size recommendations, but I put them here for you. A couple things to know about some of the templates when you open them, and then probably the place I use the most, which is over here, which is our formula syntax. So this is just breaking down all of the syntax you can use in family creation for formulas. So arctangents, exponents, cosines, pi, if you want to use greater than, less than, or equal to, both true, and, ors, etc. And then a nice little breakdown of the if condition statement, which is super powerful. So definitely take a minute to download that, whether now or after the show. Just head on over to live.bimafterdark.com. There's also a bunch of cool live free resources over there too. Caroline is super excited to be joining in Ireland. Hey, so I do these live streams at different times. Usually it's 12:30 Eastern or 7:30 Eastern, depending on the day and the guest. If there's a guest on, I do recognize that at 12:30 it's a lot easier for you guys in Europe and beyond. So hopefully this works for you today. Thank you for joining us from Ireland, Canada, all over the place. Awesome. So we're talking about arrays, and I was trying to figure out different ways to approach this, and what I really wanted to focus on was the utilization of them just generally, and then just things to know when you're using an array. That it's common issues I see when people are trying some of the examples, for example, in some of my courses, that I always see the same issue coming up, and then just sort of things that'll help you along the way if you're taking this and using it onto another example or another project. Oh, one last thing too before we jump in, make sure you subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit the little bell notification to get notifications when we go live. We are actually almost at 38,000, so it'd be really cool if we could hit 40,000. So if you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe. If you know someone who hasn't subscribed, tell them to subscribe too. But how cool would that be to have 40,000 subscribers on a Revit YouTube channel? Pretty sweet. Okay, so thank you guys again for joining. So this is kind of the family that we're going to work with today, and I'm in a project environment, so I'm just going to place it. It's actually a line-based family, and as you can see, if I click and drag, it's actually line-based. So if I shrink it, it's going to make a bunch of boxes that are growing and stretching based on the line. But where the array comes in is if I want to, I can change this from 25 boxes to 30 boxes, click apply, and you can see now there's 30 boxes within that line. Okay. So I'm using boxes. I'm going to keep this simple because, again, what I really want you to take away from this is the concepts and then how you can apply them to other families. But with all that being said, I did want to sort of use an example that was useful and could be useful for a very specific thing. So actually, this I usually use a family like this when I'm doing like maybe lockers or bookcases that are in a row and a family itself that duplicates over time. But either way, I also wanted to keep it simple, so that's why it's a box. Anyways, so that's kind of how the family works. And if I go into the family itself, this is kind of what it looks like. And we'll actually start from scratch, but we'll actually run through the box. So I'm not going to teach you how to build this box. I'm going to show you how it's built. It's very simple. It's just a generic model. If I go into my floor plan view, you can see it has a width and a depth parameter, and then there's EQs so that it stays centered. That's really important. What you'll see with arrays is that if you really want the array to work for you, we're going to be using the centers of families a lot more than the edges, and I'll show you exactly why. And then these parameters themselves, the width and the depth parameters, if I open them up, they are, you can see how they say default and default. Oh, maybe I'll zoom in a little so you guys can see it better. Those are instance parameters. That's another key piece, is that this is going to be nested into our line-based family, and they're going to be instance parameters because we're going to use our line-based family to sort of control whatever we need to control. All right, so that's really what it is. And actually, I do have, if I go to the front view, I do have a height parameter. That's actually a type parameter. Doesn't really make a big difference, but we're going to pull it through. So that's the box. I'm not going to run through how to create the box. If you're interested, check out some of my other videos. I forgot which episode it was, but you can head on over to live.bimafterdark.com to see previous episodes. And I built a table from scratch and a few other things, and those will help you sort of understand the absolute basics of family creation. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to start a new family, and I'm going to make it line-based. Andres just asked, how did I zoom? Great question, actually. So when you're in most dialogues, but not all dialogues in Revit, most of them now you can. If you hold Control and you scroll with your mouse wheel, it lets you zoom in to a certain point and zoom out too. So I wish I could tell you exactly which ones work and which ones don't, but it honestly is kind of all over the place. So great question, Andres. That's pretty cool. Okay, so I'm going to create, and the only reason I'm doing a line-based family, this can work in a non-line-based family. I'm just doing a line-based family because I think it's a cool example, and that's what we're going to use. If you had a regular family, like a bookshelf or something like that, then you're using the height instead of the length, and it's still the same process. But I want you to remember, we're trying to understand the concepts so you can apply them to lots of things. So let's go to New Family. English Imperial, because I have everything installed on this apparently, and I'm going to do a generic model line-based. Oh, and I forgot to mention, Emil, great point in the chat. The zooming and scrolling into properties only works in specific versions. I think it's a 2019 or 2020 and beyond thing. I know, bizarre, but it is what it is. So I'm going to create a generic model line-based and click Open. Okay, so anyone who's not familiar with a line-based family, it's exactly what I showed you in the project that we opened up. So in here, what it is you're drawing a line. So here's a start point, here's a finish point, and that is controlling your family. So that's kind of your start and end. That's your placement. Instead of placing it in one place, you're placing a start and an end. And so that's what we're going to use here. Is we're going to utilize this family, and you can see it has a length. So if I pull this, there we go, the length. I'm actually going to make the length longer so that we have something to work with. I'm going to make this 22. All right. Okay, so now let's just talk about the array in general. Okay, before we actually do anything with it, I'm gonna sort of just let you understand a little bit of how an array works. Okay, so let me bring in this box now. So if I open up this box, I'm actually gonna load this box into my new family I just created, which is my line-based family. Okay, so here's my box. For now, we're gonna ignore this. We're just gonna go through some. We're gonna ignore the line. We're just gonna go through some basic box things or array things. You can see the box has instance parameters, so I can actually push and pull the length and width length and width or width and depth, depending on what I called it. But the height is a type parameter. Anyways, so an array. So how do you use the array tool? AR is the keyboard shortcut, or on the top under modify, there's these little four cubes or 4 squares with 3 blue ones and 1 white one. That's the array button. Okay, if I type AR on my keyboard, I like to use the keyboard shortcut, and then I'm gonna click the object, give it a distance, and then click again, and then it's gonna ask me to type in a number. Okay, so this is where the array comes into play. It's arraying the object a specific distance, a specific number of times. So if I say 5, right? You notice they're all the same distance, and there's 5 of them. If I wanted to change the number of them, I can click here, and I can say 12. And now there's 12 of them, right? So let me pull this back down to 5. Okay, so it's using a set distance, and then it's multiplying it over the number of times, okay? Samau just asked, what's the difference between array-based families and families based on a railing? The railing itself is its own different object. They're separate. I guess you can kind of think of them as the same, but the reality is they're different. The railing, you're setting up a pattern, and you're using a baluster family, and there's all kinds of other rules and restrictions in that. This is just specifically multiplying an object a certain number of times by a certain distance or location. Okay, so the one thing that I wanted to mention that I really want you to understand with arrays is that when you're using them in the family environment especially, the second object in your array is the most important one. What I mean by that is what sets the tone for the rest of the objects. So the distance, the location, the rotation, whatever it is. So if I take number 2 here, this is number 2, right? Hopefully you guys can see this. All right, let me move it out of my head. Okay, and if I nudge it back, notice what happens here. See that? The spacing is adjusting for all of them equally, because the first, or number 2, I guess, the first duplicate, but number 2 in the array, that's what sets the distance for the other 700 if you had them. Okay, so this is huge, right? This is controlling everything. The other thing, not just the distance from the original, even the location of it. So if I go down, look what happens here. Right, so now I'm just nudging up and down, up and down, up and down. Okay, up and down. So this is probably one of the most important pieces of understanding arrays, is that number 2 in line, so the first duplicate, or the second, whatever you want to call it, and second in the array, that is what sets the tone for the next. If I pressed 100 here, they're all going to go 100 in the same direction, in the same distance, right? So that's huge, because then when we want to actually start putting parameters on this, that we need to know that, because that's going to control everything. That's going to decide the world, right? Now I see a couple questions, so let me just jump in and check real quick. Is it possible, Bob, how's it going? Bob Lupo, is it possible to edit the object spacing after the array is created? I think I just showed you that. You can edit the object spacing by editing number 2 in the array. Is it possible? Oops, sorry. Alan Zeely, maybe it's Alan, I'm not sure. Alan, how's it going? How does it work if you have multiple sizes in one array, since the box is an instance family? So we'll talk about that in a second. Tom just asked, can you change the distance between the objects? I just showed you that. Carmen just asked if I had a link to the cheat sheet. Yes, just head over to free.bamafterdark.com. I posted it somewhere in the chat too. And Paul just mentioned, could be second, could be last, depending on the append to option. Yes, good point, Paul. For the sake of today, I'm going to stick with number 2. But good point. Awesome. Yes, Bim Bums just mentioned it too. Yes, it could be the last one in the array. But for the sake of the tutorial today, we're going to say number 2 is our driving factor. Okay. Okay. So now that we know that, hopefully you guys understand that. You get that number 2, for the sake of today, number 2, not the last one, is the driving factor. Notice how if I nudge that around, I move this down here, I move this down here, it's all over the place, right? Yeah, we're moving all over the place here. So number 2 is our defining factor, or is defining the rest of the arrays, which is perfect. Okay. So now I'm going to delete those. Okay. So because we know that, when we're setting up parameters for this, we want to be able to set the location of number 1 and the location of number 2. Those are the most important pieces of our array, right? And the other thing that we want to do is we want to figure out how to control the width of our object based on the length in this, right? So again, this is going to be different for every family, but this is important because I want you to understand what happens if you try to use the edges of an object instead of the centers of the object, for example. So if I go back to the example, right, the way this specific family is working is our box is going to be whatever width it needs to be based on the length, right? So if I change this from 20 objects or 20 boxes to 10 boxes, the width of those boxes is going to adjust based on the length. If I shrink the length, right, it's going to adjust down based on the length there, right? Okay. So now that we know that, there's a couple things that we need to do. Initially, and what most people do is they'll start drawing reference planes. So I just used RP on my keyboard for reference planes. They'll start drawing reference planes because remember, you're thinking this is a family. So for families, I need reference planes. They stretch, they push, they pull. They do everything I need for the sake of pulling an object. And you may do something like, I need 2 reference planes, and one's going to control the width of the object. The other one's going to control the width of number 2, and blah 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 blah. So what I will tell you is that if you do this, and actually I'm gonna do it real quickly. This is kind of one of the number 1 things that I see. So I just drew 2 reference planes, and I'm gonna say I want this to be the width, the box width, and I'm gonna make that an instance parameter, and then I'm gonna make this one the box width as well. Okay. So if you put your box down now. So if I put my box right here, okay, and I lock this here, and I lock this here, and then I align the middle, AL on my keyboard, align, and then I array this thing, and I go from here to here, and I call it a day, right? Now I have to figure out how I'm gonna lock this. So I go inside, I edit the group, I do all these locking, blah, blah, blah. So the one thing that I want to tell you is that whenever, and this isn't all the time, and this is why I like to show it and talk about it, is it sometimes works, but usually not. When you are using an array, you don't typically want to lock an object by its edges and stuff. So if it's a bookshelf, for example, or whatever, what's going to happen is Revit does this weird thing where it freaks out and it like shifts and it does the stair step tool. So so what it does is if I go in here and I went to like 4, if I adjusted this, it's going to do that on you. And that is such a common thing. It's insane. No matter how many times you lock it, it's going to break or it's going to do things. It just does all kinds of stuff. So instead of just trying to break Revit live here with you guys, what I'll do is I'm just going to show you how you need to do this and how you should do this. So instead of thinking about it as box width and going from edges, what you want to do is you want to use the center of the box. And you want to use the center for the arrays. What that's going to do is you're going to lock the center vertically and horizontally, and then you're going to use parameters to control the width and the depth of the box however you want. And then it will stay in place. And that is the second key to arrays. The first key is number 2 is your most important, or the last one, depending on how you're using it. For the sake of today, it's number 2. And then the second piece is the center of your object is the best thing to use for an array. And I'm saying I should say it's usually the best, because I do know, and someone out there is going to say, well, you could do it this way. I'm just telling you for the sake of understanding the concepts and making more usable families and better working families that don't break. To me, that's what I found to be the easiest way and the best way to use arrays. So here we go. And Michelle just said, thank you for the clue of how to stop stair stepping. So Michelle already ran into this, and now she's starting to understand why. Okay, so now if we were to place this again, and if we're thinking that these now, instead of being the box widths, right, these want to be the center of our boxes. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a new parameter. So I'm going to say create parameter. I'm going to call this box width start, or you could say half or something like that. And because when you think about it, if I was to place my object here, right, and I wanted to be the center of that, and my second object was here, this reference plane wants to be the middle of this box. Okay, I'll zoom in a little, hopefully you can see it. So again, this reference plane wants to be in the middle of this box. So what does that mean? That means that our box width start is going to be what? It's going to be half of our box width, right? So let me zoom in again. So if I go here, I go box width start. Oh, Revit, that's just great. So when I click over here and I'm zoomed to a certain point, it jumps. It's just fantastic. So so let me zoom out a little so it doesn't do that on you guys. You know, I try to make it so you can see it easier, and Revit doesn't want that to happen for you. So I apologize. Although Autodesk should be apologizing, I guess. Okay, box width, right, divided by 2. So whatever the box width is, this is always going to be half of it, our box width start. So if I click apply and OK, now you'll see we have our box width, and then we have our box width start. Okay, so let me move this, try and make this make a little more sense graphically. Okay, cool. So those are going to be the centers of our boxes. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to place our boxes and we're going to align them to those centers. So I'm going to go create component. I'm going to place my box component. I'm going to put it here, and then I'm going to put it here. And then I'm going to use my align tool, so AL on my keyboard. I'm going to select my reference line or reference plane. I'm going to align this guy here. I'm going to align this guy here. Then I'm going to align the center of this to the center of that, and the center of this to the center of that. So for all intents and purposes, our boxes aren't moving from that location, right? We have a reference plane, we have a reference line, we have an intersection, and they are locked to that. Okay. Now, if we want this to be equidistant between the length, right, we need to define the box width as a result of the length, right? But what we also need is we need to be able to type in the number for the input of what that how many number of boxes are going to be. So when you look at this, if I wanted 20 boxes, how wide are they going to be? If I asked you, hey, if I put 20 boxes in a 22-foot length, right? What are they going to be? They're going to be 1'1" or whatever. Was that right? Yeah, whatever. Doesn't matter. So now you get the idea here is that the math is already going to be in there, but we need the array to do it, and we need a value for that array to do it. So we could either set up the array now, or we could do the number input. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete number 2 because that was just for for the sake of showing you how the centers work. And I'm going to take the first box, which remember the intersection of it is locked already. I'm going to type AR on my keyboard. I'm going to go from middle to middle. You can see now it has a number 2, which is fine. We don't care about that. If you want, sometimes I like to at least put 4 or 5 in here just so you can see it. But remember, number 2 is going to define it for this family. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my align tool, and I'm actually going to align the centers of the second box in our array, which is this one, right? Because remember, that defines everything, right? If I move this reference plane, well, it's going to yell at me because the constraints aren't satisfied. But if I move that reference plane, right, all the boxes would move with it, just like I showed you in the beginning. Okay. Let me just save this before my computer crashes live on us here. So let's do array live, because that would happen, right? Okay. Let me just double check you guys on the chat here. I see you guys are chatting with each other, which is fine. Emil just asked, that was quick. You are aligning the major references of the box to your reference plane in this file. Yes. Sorry, I know I went a little fast there. But what you're using is the major reference planes from the box. And remember how I said it was really important that you kept your center as your center? We're using those to align to our objects here. Okay. All right. So now, and Carmen, I see your question about the number. That's what we're going to do right now. So now, what we want to do is we need to be able to control, right, the number of the number of boxes we have. Okay, so if I click my array, there's this little bracket that comes up, right, and that right there is our array. This is where we type in if we want 30 of them, 40 of them, etc. But when you're in the family environment and in the project environment now, but in your family environment, if you click the bracket itself, what you'll notice is that on the options bar is the one in the middle between the ribbon and the view that no one ever sees. That's right here. You can see append to end. This is what Paul Albin was just talking about in the chat. What's up, Paul? How you doing? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a parameter. By the way, this is the only area that I found so far where the add parameter is still on the options bar and not up in the ribbon. Don't know why that's the case, but maybe because of the append to end. So I'm going to click add parameter. And I'm going to call this number of boxes. Sure. I should probably make it shorter, but it's fine. So I'm going to call this number of boxes. And for the sake of today, I'm going to make all these instance parameters. We could talk about type and instance and number. For the sake of today, everything's kind of an instance parameter because it's a line-based family. And I'm going to click OK. So now you'll notice it says number of boxes 4. So my number of boxes is being defined by that parameter. Okay, so that means our box width here, if we go out into our environment, into our I'm trying to zoom in without it blowing up on you guys so you can see it. It's so weird. So that means you can see number of boxes is 4 right here. Okay, so that means our box width in theory is going to be our length divided by number of boxes. And then obviously our box width is always going to be divided by that. So if I click apply now and click OK, see that? Now they're nice and equally spread between the distance. So again, what I'm saying there is that instead of actually typing in a number for our, man, this is so annoying that these bars don't stay the same. So so again, that formula was length divided by number of boxes. So that's going to be the width of our box. Okay, so the one thing that we didn't do, which I did that on purpose because I wanted you to see the space here, is that the boxes aren't adjusting between it right now, and that's okay. I kind of, for now, I kind of want that to stay like this so you can visually see it. Once we put the edges together, it can be a little harder to follow. Okay, perfect. So if we wanted, let's test this thing now because Anybody who's ever taken any course with me for family creation knows that testing and flexing is what it's all about. And that means just modifying values to see what you get. If you click here and I change the value from 4 boxes to 8 boxes and click apply, you can see now we've got 8 boxes. They're overlapping, so you're not really seeing. There we go. So now you're not seeing it. So I won't go any more than 6 right now. If I change the length of this, I can do this. I should be able to drag this without blowing it up. If I drag this across, you'll notice the box width and the box start width are all adjusting. So they're staying with the center of our boxes. Perfect. Okay. All right. So the part of the reason why I didn't want to adjust the width yet is I want to talk a little bit about how to manage 1 box and 5 boxes in the same thing. So before I jump into that, Andres just asked the question, is it possible to reverse the process, modifying the length of the line so the boxes are added? Yes. So I'm using the length to drive the number of boxes. You could reverse it, but it'd be a little different. The family itself, you probably wouldn't want to use a line-based family for that specific process. No, actually, you didn't have to. What you would do is you would use a parameter in here. So actually, I mean, we could just. I don't know if I want to go off on the tangent on that yet, but I'll try. So, yeah. So what you could use is the box width, let's say, the box width, and then the total length, and then do a formula for that. So if I mean, it's live. Let's do it. Why not? So what Andres is asking is, instead of me saying, I want these boxes to be 20 of them to be equidistant between 30 feet, what if you wanted them to always be 2 feet, but then be, the number of them would exist based on the length. And so what you would do for that is we would, oh man, this zoom thing is, if you guys can read it without me zooming, let me know, because then I won't zoom. But like, this is just driving me bonkers. I'm trying to make it so you can see it easier, and instead Revit doesn't want to react. And then every time I change this. Okay, so instead of length times divided by number of boxes, what we're going to do here is we're going to say, okay, if we want our width to be 5 feet, or not, let me cancel out of this. I don't know what I just did. I think I pressed F1 again on the side here. Okay. Oh, because I have to type. Oh my goodness. Look where I'm typing on that. How bizarre is that? Look at that tab. Okay. So instead of doing length divided by number of boxes, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say it would be length, I guess, divided by box width. I don't know if that's going to be exactly what we want, but it'll be close. I just want to show you the concept. So now you can see length divided by box width it's showing me as a 6. Right, so now it's length divided. So now if I increase the length, it's going to add boxes. See that? Actually, my head might be in the way. It's going to add boxes, and then it's going to subtract boxes as I go down this way. So not too different. You would obviously want to work in some math based on the width, and you get the idea. But yes, you can reverse engineer that. Great question. Now let me try and find this. Every time I go in this, it's tabbed further away. How bizarre is that? Okay. So now this one's going to be length divided by number of boxes, right? Number of boxes. Okay. Rick just said, please zoom, old eyes. I'm zooming, man. I'm zooming. It's just, it's doing weird crap, as you saw. Andres said it's readable without zooming. So it looks like everyone has their own ideas there. Is it possible to establish a range parameter? For example, box count no less than 5 and no more than 10. Man, you are just leading the witness here. I love it. I love it. Thank you for the question, Pablo. We're not going to do exactly that, but I'm going to show you something similar that relates to it. Okay, so the one thing, and this is sort of number 3 point that I wanted to just get to with arrays. So the first one was the second copy of your array controls everything for today. Maybe, Paul, maybe I'll have you come on and we can talk about the other option, which is the what's it called? Append to end. But either way. So the second piece, the second duplicate of your array, the second thing I wanted you to understand was that using the middle of your object and locking and aligning that when you're using an array is the better approach to arraying. using the middle of objects and not the edges of objects, and then you will avoid the stair step. And the last piece is you cannot have an array of 1. So what you do when that happens. So if you'll notice, when I go back into this project, if I click this family, I can actually type a number 1 here and click apply. And look at this, there's 1 object, right? But then if I click this and I type number 2, click apply, there's 2 of them. So I actually have an array that has 1 as well as many as I want in there. And this always gets people stuck, because if I went in here and I tried to type in a number 1 for the array, if I click 1 and click apply, look what Revit says. Parameter number of boxes has an invalid value. You cannot have 1 array, because then it's not an array anymore. It's just the object, right? It's a group, I guess. I don't know. So how do you do that? There's a couple ways to approach it. This is the way that I teach people, especially in the very beginning when you're learning arrays, and it's using you're using a visibility parameter and some formulas to actually control this. So you don't have to physically do this in the project, as you saw, as the example I just showed you was. You click the number 1, it does it automatically. So once you set it up, the user doesn't even know that this is happening, but it's super valuable. This is an example with boxes, but the other example I always use is a bookshelf, which is a perfect example where you may only want 1 bookshelf instead of 2, so it makes sense. Okay, so what do we do and how do we manage this? Well, the first thing we need to do is, here we go in the parameter area again. Look how far this tab is. Man, how bizarre is that? You know what? I think this is a Revit 2021 thing, because this has not happened for me in 2020. I don't know about you guys, but I found a lot of weird crap happening in Revit 2021. Okay, so let's try. Let me try and get it so you can at least see everything in one box, but I don't think it's going to work. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we actually need to make a new parameter that we're calling an input parameter. So this isn't being assigned to anything. It is a parameter that the user is going to input with. Okay, so I'm going to create a new parameter using the little plus or the new parameter button down here. Okay, and I'm going to make this an instance, and I'm going to call this one number of boxes input. And I know these aren't the best naming conventions for families, and we can have a whole episode on how to name family parameters, but for now I'm just using them for the sake of understanding the concepts. Ideally, number of boxes input is kind of a long parameter name, because then you have to use it in formula, so it's not the greatest thing to use. So if we want, for the sake of argument, we can say number input, so I don't have to type it every time. And we're going to make this an integer, because that's what arrays use. They use an integer, not a number, in case you didn't know that. I'm going to keep it under other, and I'm going to click OK. Okay. Now, we have this input, and then we have the number of boxes. We want the user to only use the input part of this, okay? So, but we also want the number of boxes down here where it says 4, that can't ever be less than 2. So before we do the formulas, there's 2 other things we need, okay? Actually, you know what? Let's do the formula first. I'm going to type it way over here because Revit is weird. Like, really, look at that tab. What is that? Okay, so we're actually going to use an if statement to get this to work. Okay, and so if I pull up my lovely cheat sheet, whoa, and zoom in like a madman on Bluebeam. Let's try that again. Now Bluebeam wants to be weird on me. I tell you, it's one of those days, huh? There we go. Okay, so based on my cheat sheet, this is how an if statement works. We do if, and then we look for a condition, plus or minus, less than, equal to, value equals, blah, 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 blah. And then you do a comma, and then if that condition is true, so if x equals y, then we want this to happen. If it's false, that's what the next comma is. So we're basically going to tell Revit, if the user inputs this, I want this to happen. If he inputs this or she inputs this, I want this to happen. Okay, so that's the simple breakdown of an if condition. Okay, so if I'm thinking about that, if I say if, what do we want to happen here? If the number input, right, because this is what the user's using, or the user's inputting into, if the number input is less than 2, right, because we don't want this value here to be less than 2, what do we want this value to be? We'll make it 2. if it's true, I should say. Sorry. So if the number input is less than 2, what happens when that's true? Which means if the user puts in the number 1, what happens? We actually want this value of number of boxes to stay at 2. Because if you think about it, if it goes to 1, it's going to break. Okay? Okay. So then if it's false, so if the user puts in number 1, what do we want to happen here? Right? Or sorry, if the user puts in greater 2 or greater, what do we want to happen? We want the number of or the number input to be the result, right, of this value. So let me just show you what happens now when I do that. So notice right now the number input is 0 and this says number 2. If I click 1, guess what? This still says number 2. But if I click 5, guess what happens? Oops, this now says 5. Right? So what we've done here is we've built in a failsafe. So if we go under number 2, if I click number 1, our array is always going to stay at 2, so Revit's not going to break, right? But if we go above it, it's going to take that value and use our array with that value. Okay? Okay, so now we've got an input, a user input for this, okay? But now, if I go to apply here, the problem is if we do number 2, it's just going to show 2 of these, and that doesn't really work for us because we need it to show 1. So what do we need to do? We need to place an object that exists for when there's only 1, and then the array is going to be when there's 2 or more, right? So we actually need to place a new box, and then we're going to use formulas to actually control that, which is pretty cool. So let's place a new box. I'm going to click Create Component, and there's a reason why I'm keeping these boxes small, right? We'll go through that. So now I'm just going to place that in the middle. I'm going to align it horizontally, and then because this is not an array, I'm just going to actually pull the edges and lock them to here, because if it's 1, right, it just wants to be the length of this. Okay, so that's that guy there. And then we have our actually, you know what I'll do for the sake of visually seeing? No, it's not gonna do it. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so Revit Pure. Hey, what's up, Nick? How you doing, man? Nick from Revit Pure has joined us. Okay, so we have 2 and we have 1. The problem is right now, if I brought this into the family environment or the project environment, and you know what, for the sake of it, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. So if I place this now in my family environment, you'll see we actually are seeing all of those. We're seeing the single and we're seeing the array. So now we just need one more set of parameters or formulas that are going to control what we see when the user inputs a specific value. Okay, so let's go back to the family. Let's jump into this guy. Actually, before we do that, we need to set the visibility parameter. So what we're going to use is we're actually going to use visibility parameters. So if I select this box, right, by default it's on, right? Over on the left-hand side under properties, you'll notice there's a checkbox for visibility. So if I uncheck that, guess what? It wouldn't be visible in the project environment, right? We turn it on and off. It's visibility. It's kind of like graphic override, but for the family. But what I can do is I can actually associate a parameter to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the little gray box next to visible. It's the little teeny gray box called associate family parameter. And I'm going to add a parameter. I'm going to call this one single box. You could say on off, you could say visibility, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to make it an instance and I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to click OK. Now, for the array, I'm actually going to have to go inside the group. So I'm going to click the first array and I'm going to say edit group. I'm going to select the object and I'm going to have to apply a visibility parameter to this one. And the reason I had to go inside the group is you saw I tabbed and it was all grayed out. I'm going to make a new one and I'm going to say multiple boxes or multi-boxes. How about that? Multi-boxes. Instance other. So now I have 2 visibility parameters. One turns on and off our arrays and the other one turns on and off our single box. Okay. Almost there. Wow. Every time I open this, look, it gets further and further away. I can't believe that right now. It's bizarre. And I was saying to myself before we started, I was like, maybe I should actually do this in 2020 instead of 2021. No, I'll use the latest and greatest. Great idea, Jeff. I can't believe this. Look at this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and do this without seeing the parameters, which is not a good idea. So I'd like for everyone to see the parameters here. And hopefully it stays. Okay, I'm not going to touch anything now. Okay, So single box, right? We're going to want to turn this on and off. So here's another issue is there is no equal, less than or equal to in Revit. So it's the way you handle less than or equal to is you just kind of use the less than or the equal to, and you try and figure out which one makes sense to you. So let's do the multiple boxes first. The multiple boxes, right? These ones, when do we want them to turn on? When the number input is what? Greater than 1, right? So now you can see this checkbox. Hopefully you can. It's grayed out. If I go 1, guess what happens? This unchecks. If I go 2, it checks. If I go 5, it checks. All right, so now our number input is controlling the visibility of those boxes, which is our entire array, whether there's 400 of them or 4 of them. Okay, so now for this guy, if we say number input, we could say less than 1, but I think if we say equal to 1, it'd be okay, because 0 isn't going to do anything for us. But or I guess we could do less than 1. Doesn't really make a difference. Let's see. Does it make a difference? I don't remember. Let's try it. Less than 1. So no, less than. So we're going to need to do equals 1. If you wanted to do a condition for 0 and all that other stuff, we could build that in. But I just want to show you how this works with the checkbox. So now, as you can see, if I type in 1, this guy checks on. If I type in 4, he checks off and he checks on. So again, on the user front in the project environment, all you're doing is typing number input, which is awesome, right? Okay, so before we bring that into the project, actually, let's bring it into the project environment so I can show you. So if I load this into the project, you'll notice if I pull this way, Klaus just said you could do not, which is a great point. You could do a not parameter instead. So good point there. Thank you very much. So if I place this now and I change this to 6 and click apply, there we have our 6, right? If I change this to 8, click apply. But if I change it to 1, click apply, look what happens. It's just the 1. So all those arrays are turned off and now I'm just seeing the 1. So now I'm able to control this array using visibility parameters, and I'm actually able to have 1, which is pretty awesome. Okay, awesome. So first, so last piece there, right, was what to do when you need a 1. The array can't be less than 2. So last but not least, if we want this to be equal, remember how these guys are equidistant. So if we want that, what we need to do is we actually need to edit the group, and we need to assign these parameters to our parameters in our project. So I'm just clicking my object, and this just goes back to nested families and nested parameters. You always need to pull them through. So if I go in here and I want to change the width of this, I just click associate to family parameter. I'm going to say box width, and I'm going to click OK. And then if I want, I can create a parameter for depth because I didn't create one. So I'm just going to assign this for depth, box depth. And you could make that a instance or a type, doesn't matter. I guess I'll make it an instance since we're using those. Notice how there's dots now instead of arrows. That's because those are associated. So if I click finish, now look at this. Our arrays are perfectly evenly spaced, and then our single array, remember, is back here doing its thing. So now if I was to load this into my project, go like this and this, now you could see we've got ourselves equally spaced object. If I wanted 40 of these, click apply, I have 40 of them. If I only want 1, I have 1. And if you notice, if you look closely, those formulas, those are just gray boxes here. So the user's just typing in how many they want, and then Revit's doing the rest of the work in the formulas. So boom, there we have it. That was the lesson. So first takeaway for arrays was the second object in an array is what's going to control your distances and direction. The second takeaway is aligning the center of your array when you're in a family environment is the key to keeping it from doing the weird stair step and going off into the ether. And then the third piece of it is arrays can't be less than 2. So you're going to have to do some funky stuff to make sure that your array, if you want a single version of it, you may have to use visibility parameters. Maybe you have a nested family, something that does it. But yeah, that's what we got. So Revit Pure, how's it going? Nick said, random fact I've learned this week: if statement condition cannot be a text parameter. Interesting. So you can't use an if statement in a text parameter. Is that what you're saying? Interesting, Nick. Yeah. So if there's any more questions, Alan just said this solved a long time struggle that I've had with Revit. Well, you are welcome, sir. I'm so glad of that. I hope this was helpful for you guys. Chris just asked, what happens if you input 0? So what's going to happen if you input 0 is that they're both going to turn off. So that's because, remember, it was equal 1 and not a not or if that. So that visibility piece is probably better off. Instead of doing, you could do a not. There's different ways to approach that piece. So I just did it for the sake of oh, actually, you guys didn't see what I just did. Hold on. Sorry about that. So if you have it make it equal to 0, I'll show you right now. If I type 0, everything just turned off. See, my family's there, but both visibilities are turned off. So that's why you'd want to think about how you actually do and approach that, depending on your project, how you want to approach that. Let's see. Anyway, Junior just asked, always having issues downloading the stuff from your website. Tried a while ago. It seems to email. Junior, I'm sorry about that. The automated system for sending out some of the free content sometimes has issues. If you guys have issues, just shoot me an email. I've been in the process of trying to update some of the back end stuff. But if you're not getting the freebie, the free resource you signed up for, don't hesitate. Shoot me an email. Anything else? What do we got? Michelle just said less than 2. Less than 2 could work. That's a good point, Michelle. Thank you. Klaus just said missing the yellow strat. It's still back there. It's just a little out of view. I'm in the process of rearranging some things, and hopefully in a month or 2, I'll be in a completely different office. So that'll be kind of fun. All right. So again, head on over to free.bimafterdark.com to download the cheat sheet. I hope you guys enjoyed this lesson. Thank you so much. You guys are amazing. Feel free to reach out. You can reach me at the Revit Kid on Twitter, or you can email me. Just head on over to bimafterdark.com and find my contact information. Make sure you subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. And thank you guys. Have a lovely week. Enjoy yourself. Stay safe. Stay warm if you're anywhere like me and it's freaking freezing. And yeah, that's all I got for today. So thank you guys so much. You're amazing. I'll see you soon.